My name is Betsy Swift. I want to welcome you on behalf of Indivisible-Common Ground Western North Carolina to our candidate forum for the Congressional NC-11 seat. We have not all the candidates, but the Democrat candidates, the candidates on the Democratic ballot tonight. We're still waiting for one of them to arrive. So in the interim, we would like to make some announcements and also introduce any other candidates for other seats who are in the audience. First announcement, I would like to let everyone know that you are welcome to Indivisible meetings, which are generally the form of a planning group, planning how to respond to the events as they unfold, is usually what we end up doing. Our next meeting is March 4th, a Wednesday at 7 o'clock, and we meet at Guadalupe Cafe on Main Street in Silva. And that announcement will be on our Facebook page. And if anybody here isn't connected with us through Facebook, that information is here. We also we have a Twitter feed, but that's not super active. But most of the time we use Facebook to make announcements and pass information along. What other announcements are there, Joan?
Hi, I'm Joan Parks. I'm part of the Indivisible-Common Ground. I also work for the 2020 census. I'm not doing that currently, but I would like to encourage anybody that's interested in a job. It pays $17 an hour for an enumerator. There are some other positions that are open. We need lots of people to do this because this determines how much money in our federal taxes come back into the community. So it's really important. This helps pay for our roads and our schools, hospitals, lots of different things. So we really need to get everybody counted. It's very, very important. They will start sending out notices to your home in the middle of next month. And if you don't respond, then somebody's going to come out and knock on your door. So if you don't want them to come to your door, then please fill out the form. You can do it online. You can fill out the form and send it back. Or there's a phone number that you can call. So please encourage everyone you know to sign up for the census, get that information out there. And if you're interested in a job, you can go to census2020/jobs and apply. And they are currently hiring.
Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Baxley. I'm also a member of Indivisible, as well as a member of the newly formed Jackson County Sustainability Council. And I just wanted to announce that we will be having a recycling education session here at the library on February 25th at 6 o'clock. Kimberly Schuler, who's Jackson County's Recycling and Reduction Coordinator, will be here to talk to people about what items in our county can and can't be recycled, which I know is kind of a nebulous thing for a lot of us. So I'd like to encourage you all to attend that if you're interested. Kimberly's been a wealth of information since she joined Jackson County. We also are going to be passing around a basket this evening. Looking for donations for Indivisible and for our wonderful videographer over here, Avram, who I'm sure most of you have seen. Thank you so much, Avram. He will be taking video of this and then putting it up for those who are in situations where they can't get here, which we know there's a lot of that. But thank you so much for all of you who braved the high waters to be here this evening. So thank you.
Other announcements, Jen?
Can you hear me? Hey. There'll be a canvassing event this Saturday at 1 o'clock for supporters of Elizabeth Warren. It's like a training and canvassing. It's 1 o'clock this Saturday, downtown Silva at Guadalupe.
Any other announcements? Yes, Danielle.
Hi, thank
Thank you. I work at the Jackson County Public Library, and we are having a series of events through February on elections and reliable information. So next Tuesday, we have Lisa Lovedahl with the Jackson County Board of Elections. She'll be talking about the mechanics of voting, the new voter ID law, and the new machines. And then the Tuesday after, we'll have Chris Cooper back, and he'll be talking about elected offices, what they are and what they mean to us on a daily basis. And then the last Tuesday of the month, I will be doing a hands-on program in the computer lab about reliable information, how to decipher information online, and then offering some vetted resources through the library. There's some handbills outside with those dates and times on it. Thank you.
Are there any candidates for other offices in attendance? Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan Bogartis, and I'm running for District 3 County Commissioner in Jackson County. If you have questions about what I'm interested in promoting with the commission, please see me afterwards. Bye now.
Hello, my name's Tamara Swinak, and I'm the Green Party candidate for U.S. House of Representatives, District 11. One thing I want to stress is I'm running on sustainability, so you will not see signs on the roadside. I'm not handing out a bunch of literature to people. It's a low-impact campaign, but you can follow me on Twitter at ZWINAK 2020. Thank you so much, and good luck to all the candidates.
There was...
Hi, my name is Justin Green. I'm an attorney in Bryson City, North Carolina, and I'm the Democrat candidate for District Court Judge in the 30th Judicial District. You won't see my name on the ballot in March, but you will see it in November. I've been in practice for 14 years here in Jackson County. I started out, I was the guardian ad litem attorney advocate in 2007, 2008, 2009. I've had a general law practice. I've had criminal and civil cases throughout my entire career. I'm currently the attorney of Swain, the county attorney for Swain County, and the DSS attorney in Graham County. I hope in the next 9 months, everybody gets a chance to get to know me and kind of what I stand for. I'm not really a political person. I'm kind of a sort of a novice in all this, but I'm looking forward to meeting everybody. I'm an attorney, not a politician, so I hope that sort of carries me through, and I hope that gets me some favor from everybody out there that's kind of like me. I hope I can get everybody's support come November. You will start seeing signs for me, just not yet. It'll be around probably at some time before they're out and all that kind of stuff. Right now, I've got a Facebook page. It's Justin Green for District Court Judge. Please go on, look at it, like it, share it. I need to get the word out to everybody I can because it's a 7-county district everywhere from Haywood County west over to Murphy. So I'm really counting on Jackson County to come up big. I've lived and worked here for years, and I hope everybody will get behind me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gail Woodian, and I'm not up for re-election. I'm a county commissioner here in Jackson County. But Commissioner Dietz and I were just at a meeting where our Attorney General Josh Stein, who is up for re-election, we met with him, and he is unopposed in the primary. But because this crowd is so great, I just want to say 2 things really quickly, because I think it's essential that we have this on our radar. He is being targeted to be unseated by $15 million of money from out of state. They've already collected this money to unseat our current Attorney General. And he, as I said, is unopposed, so he's not going to be on this early primary ballot, but he will be, and it's an essential election for us in North Carolina. He has fought hard against Duke Energy, and he has also fought for us in the Dogwood Trust. He made sure that they're being accountable and that they're representational for our community. And I could go on and list things that he is doing fighting for us. So I just want us to keep him on our radar, Josh Stein, Attorney General for North Carolina.
We're getting close, and thank you, everyone. I have some sample ballots for the primary election. One-stop voting starts next Thursday, a week from today. There are a lot of choices, a lot of things to familiarize ourselves with before voting. We don't have a lot of these. For some reason at the Board of Elections, these are like gold, and they only let me have 25. So maybe one per household, and I'll put them on the table in the back for you to take. And they'll be online on
Get it up on jacksondems.com.
If you do come to the reference desk at the library, we will print you out a sample ballot for free as well.
Oh, thank you. And this is the Jackson County ballot, right? Yeah. And we have some more information about the other counties.
On the table out here, there's a list of early voting sites for Macon, Jackson, Haywood, and Swain. So if you need that information, use your phone, just take a picture of it. I just put a copy out there. Trees.
Okay, without further ado, whatever that means, I would turn this over to Professor Chris Cooper, who I don't think needs a lot of introduction.
Thank you. I'll keep my part of this real brief. Just, yes. What? Okay, closer. Okay. This is probably a better sign for you guys than for me. So just a few things at the beginning. Make sure we all know kind of why we're here. We are meeting, obviously, the candidates for the 11th Congressional District. I think it's worth mentioning at the beginning, these folks are all running for the 11th Congressional District, not for other offices. If you're newer to the region, just a tiny bit of background about the district, right? So this has been the subject of some recent court rulings, so it's recently been redrawn. The one thing that's maintained the same is Jackson County is geographically, and as a Jackson County resident, I would say sort of spiritually at the core of the 11th Congressional District. It's the farthest west district in North Carolina. It's represented, of course, by Mark Meadows now, who's not running for re-election. So we've got five Democrats running today. We've got a couple of folks from third parties, including one here today, and then we've got a host of Republicans. And there's it's actually the largest field in the state of North Carolina. Over 1 in every 4 people running for Congress in North Carolina are running for this district. So everybody's third largest in the country, if you really want to geek out. So the primary election is going to be March 3rd. Early voting will begin February 13th. Of course, Democrats can vote in the Democratic primary, Republicans in the Republican primary. Unaffiliated voters get to choose your own adventure. Remember those books when you're in the 7th grade. So just keep that in mind as we're moving forward here. I think everybody who's up here certainly wants to make sure that we have good voter turnout regardless. So just a tiny bit about the rules. We've got, of course, 5 folks up here, so we're going to be a little bit stricter than we might otherwise be about time limits. So we've got 2 minutes per question. There's some little timers right up there if you'll see, and with 30 seconds left, this is really for the candidates more than anybody else. 30 seconds left, that's going to turn yellow, and then it'll flash a very annoying red if you go on too long. If anybody's name gets mentioned, we can do a rebuttal. The rebuttals will be 1 minute, so hopefully we'll keep those fairly limited. Sounds like these folks have been in enough forums, including earlier today, so they know kind of how this goes, but we will have the potential for 1 minute rebuttal. So with that, we will begin with 2-minute opening statements, and we'll start on this side and move our way over.
How y'all doing? My name is Michael O'Shea, and I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives. Let's see a little about me. I was born and raised in Mills River, North Carolina, out near the airport. My father and minister were the music director, my father and mother were the music director and minister of church out there. And I studied philosophy and English at Western Carolina University. Go Cats, that's right. Repping some purple for y'all. My wife also grew up in East Asheville and went to Western where she studied elementary education. I am running as a progressive Democrat. I'm 32 years old, which makes me a little younger than most folks on this stage. I'm actually the first millennial to be on the ballot for a Democratic primary for this office. Oh, that's great. Thank you. So, when I say progressive, to me, it means progress, moving forward. We don't move forward by being timid. History has taught us that we move forward by reaching, for aspiring. And I think that you'll find that my platform is the most aspirational and idealistic on this slate. They usually say that's a criticism, but to me, I think that's a good thing. How many of you all think Social Security is a radical, bold proposal? That's what I thought. How about Medicare for over 65? Cool. These things seemed bold and radical when they were first proposed. New solutions are always untested, and they're scary at first. I don't see the problems we face right now as things to be scared of. I see them as opportunities to change our society for the better. And I am out of time. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Gina Callias, and I would like to be the first Congresswoman for District 11. I'm a mother and of 3 children, and I want to make their world a better place. I grew up in North Carolina. I married my high school sweetheart from North Carolina. We've been married 29 years, and I intend to grow old in North Carolina. And my children have loved being in North Carolina. My son is in Asheville in high school. I'm in Fairview in Buncombe County. I am a pro-choice, pro-ERA, pro-civil rights, pro-educational woman. And I want you to know that I gave the commencement address at UNC Chapel Hill this last May for the political science department. And I have always been involved in my community. I've served on the Moss Lake Reservoir. I've served for economic development, did a referendum for liquor by the drink so we could have a restaurant. I did Chamber of Commerce. All those things are important. And that has brought me to today, because what happened is that I found irregularities in the Electoral College of the votes from North Carolina and across the entire country, 50 invalid elector votes, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about that later. I am here because I want to help us with Medicare for all who want it. So if you're sick, you're not choosing between medicine and the rent. Our environment, so that we have a safe planet for our children. And to make sure that if you do an honest day's work, you get an honest day's wage, a living wage. And to make sure that Social Security and Medicare are protected. We need these things. I am the candidate that I believe I can bring Democrats, independents, and disaffected Republicans who can see the light. We need these votes to win. We have to have Democrats and unaffiliated come together. I am interested in bridging differences and building bridges. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Steve Woodsmall. I have already grown old in North Carolina. I think I am the oldest one in this group, and I'll borrow a line from Ronald Reagan. I will not, I pledge right now, I will not, for political purposes, exploit any of my opponent's youth and inexperience. I'm a retired Air Force officer. I have a PhD in management. Some of you may remember me from 2018. We've got a chance to flip this district blue. We're going to flip this district blue. We were all to forum a week or so ago in Asheville. We got to hear most of the Republican candidates that are on the ticket. And as far as I'm concerned, you could put them in a hat and pick one out and let's go after it, because it was not a pretty thing to listen to. We've got to have reasonable representation in Washington, D.C. We've got to win this thing in November. To do that, I have to win on March the 3rd. I need your help. I need your support. We're leading in the polls. It's looking pretty good, but we're sprinting to the finish line. And it's 2020 is the year that we're going to turn Western North Carolina Air Force blue. Thank you all very much.
Hi, I'm Mo Davis. I'm a native-born North Carolinian. I was born, raised, and educated here. I joined the military when I was 25 and left to serve my country, and I served for 30 years, so I'm not inexperienced. I'm not a millennial. I've got a millennial's worth of service to the country. I served 25 years in the Air Force. I'm a retired colonel. I was the chief prosecutor at Guantanamo Bay. I retired over torture. I think if you're going to run on your record, you ought to put it out there. I keep hearing Major Woodsmall talk about his diverse record, but I've never seen it. My record's out there. Go to the website. There's 12 pages that tells you every assignment I ever had, every place, every date, every award, every article I wrote, every presentation I've done. So my record's out there. I'm not running from my record. I'm running on it. I'm a disabled veteran. I get my VA care at the VA hospital. I'm going to fight to keep it open. We do have to win. This really is the most important election of our lifetime. I decided to run because I looked at the field and at the time Mark Meadows was running, I didn't see anyone that I thought had what it takes to beat Mark Meadows. I'm not afraid to run against any of them. You may have seen the ad by Jim Davis, who they say is the leading contender. He's got the ad holding a 9mm pistol and a stack of cheeseburgers. And he says the Democrats are going to take them away from you. Well, I'm a gun owner and a grill owner. So I'm not running away from guns or cheeseburgers. But I think you have to be sensible. So after I left the military, I retired. I worked on Capitol Hill. I was a senior specialist in national security for the 111th Congress. I was the head of the Foreign Affairs, Defense, and Trade Division at Congressional Research Service, where we trained Congress. I was a law professor at Howard University for 4 years, and most recently I was a judge at the Department of Labor. I've got a record that I'm running on. I stood up and made the tough decisions. I'm endorsed by the Sierra Club, by the AFL-CIO Regional Council, by 2 of Barack Obama's cabinet officials, Chris Liu and Ambassador Rich Verma, who will come down here and campaign because they know me, my record, and my integrity. We've got to win this, and I need your help in March to win in November. I'm Mo Davis. Thank you.
Hello, Jackson County. It's good to be home. I'm Philip Price, and I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives to serve you and all the 17 counties in the 11th District. I'm not running against anyone or anything. I'm running for you, for us. I am currently serving on the State Executive Board. I was elected in McDowell County to represent McDowell County on the North Carolina Democratic Party State Executive Committee. I've lived in this district for 36 years. And Jackson County is where I have my deepest roots. My lovely wife is from Jackson County. I went to Western Carolina University. Michelle and I were married up in Cashiers 23 years ago. We have 3 awesome kids. My parents are both buried up in Jackson County. I own property in Jackson County, and I pay taxes, property taxes here in Jackson County. So I can assure you that when the vote comes up on this house, the floor of the House, what I'm going to be thinking about is how is this going to affect my people back in Jackson County and McDowell County and all the other counties in this district. I own a lumber recycling business for 20 years. I've been building that business from the ground up. And I've traveled all around the 17 counties. I have friends and family. I have customers. I have business associates that are Republican and Democrat and Libertarian and unaffiliated all throughout this district. I have relationships, and that's important. It's not about who you know in Washington and who you know that's going to come down here and help you. Who's going to be served? Who's going to be served if those are the people that are helping you? I've been endorsed by 117,000 people who voted for me in the general election. I won 14 of the 16 counties in the primary in the last election, and I actually beat Mark Meadows in Buncombe County by 9 points. And that was with the horribly gerrymandered map. So I have the name recognition and the experience to win this election. I'm Philip Price. Thank you very much.
We'll continue to round robin and start here. The next question, Quentin?
It's a rebuttal.
Steve, would you like to have a 1-minute rebuttal? Sure. All right.
Well, he wanted to point out my record, and I would just say I highly encourage everybody in here, please do your homework. Look at those records. Look at everything you can find on the internet. then make your decision. Because I have a record too, but it's a little different than his. So please check it out. I have nothing in my background that any of those Republicans can throw at me in the general election. I'm clean, I'm ready to fight, and we're being polite during the primary, but come March the 4th, actually, it's on. And we're gonna, as Michelle Obama used to say, when they go low, we go high. Well, I'm telling you, on March the 4th, when they go low, we're gonna step on their neck and we're gonna take this district back. Thank you.
All right. Go back to the round robin on questions and start just to my right here. So the first question that was submitted, for a series of questions that were submitted, really had to do with climate change. So one of the most pressing problems facing America today, clearly. And the question is, what specific strategies will you propose and support to move our economy towards clean and renewable energy sources? What specific strategies will you propose and support to move our economy towards clean and renewable energy sources?
Our environment is very important. We have one planet, and we need to stay here. We need our grandchildren and our children to be able to stay here and have a healthy place. And so the first thing we need to do is get back in the Paris Climate Agreement. We need to work with our allies and support them because we are not alone in the world. We need to get the lobbyists out of the EPA. We need to protect our national parks. One of my favorite trips my family did is we just went from one park to another. And I want my children to do that with their children. We need to get incentives for wind and solar. And we need to have incentives and regulations that allow people to have the benefit of solar panels. And we can also have solar towers, which is another thing that we can have. But did you know that in the different counties and municipalities have different rules for solar? So you may be able to deduct your solar energy from your bill, or you may not. And we need to even that up so we're getting those incentives used for everyone. We also need to support green jobs and a green economy. And a really good example of that is a company called New Rock. They're out of Denver in Lincoln County, but they can recycle coal ash on site. And that's tremendous. And they have already shown to Duke Power that they can make money, a lot of money. But Duke Power's whining about that and not telling you that there is technology that the Catawba River Keepers support. So that's very important to us. And then my son, I like to think about my son because he said, Mom, don't forget to mention Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is from North Carolina. He's planted 20 million trees, 69 square miles of trees. And that takes out 1.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide. That's important. That's happening here. Elon Musk gave him $1 million to plant trees. We can do this. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I support the Green New Deal. I talked about something similar back in 2018 in terms of creating green infrastructure and jobs programs like the OWPA and Civilian Conservation Corps to bring jobs to the economy here and also create the green infrastructure. We've got a lot of good opportunities here for wind and solar power. Another thing we must do is eliminate these subsidies to the fossil fuel companies, which, by the way, cost us more than what we spend in this country on education. We've got to disincentivize the fossil fuel industry and make them accountable. Hopefully they'll go away. One of the stipulations in the Green New Deal is to try to get us off of fossil fuel completely by 2030. That's a pretty aggressive goal. I think that's a reasonable goal to set. Is it achievable? I don't know. But we can't do it alone, and as Gina mentioned, we've got to get back into the Paris Climate Accords. We've got to become a world citizen and a leader in the world rather than a laughingstock of the world when it comes to climate or anything else. So, folks, I've got eight grandkids and one on the way. We've got to leave it better than we found it. Thank you.
In order to serve the people, we've got to win this race. And we can all have good ideas, but if we don't win the race in November, it doesn't count for anything. Because as was mentioned, the Republicans on the other side, when they were there last week, every one of them said they're a Trump supporter, a Second Amendment supporter, a pro-life supporter, so you know exactly what you're going to get on the other side. So we've got to win this race and turn this district blue. I think we can sell that. I agree with the Green New Deal, but it's kind of like Obamacare. If you go out into the red counties and you say Obamacare, remember people's eyes would roll back and they say you're a socialist. And it's kind of the same way with the Green New Deal. But if you break it down to the components, like Obamacare, if you say, what do you think about leaving people on with pre-existing conditions? They'd say, well, that's a good idea. They like the components, they don't like the labels. And I think with the Green New Deal, if you go out there and you say, how would you like not to be paying a power bill every month? They'd say, I'd like that. We're number 2 in solar energy production in North Carolina. This ought to be the epicenter for it. Let's put solar panels on our house that we're building. Those panels are made in America. They're not made here. We ought to be making those panels here. They're good jobs, they're good paying jobs, they're sustainable jobs. I think you can also sell it to some of those red voters that we have to win on national defense. Because if you put solar on your house and you can make your own power, then we don't need to have troops sitting in the Middle East guarding pipelines. So I think we can reach some of these folks and get them on our team if we approach them on economic interest and national security. And those green jobs, I think, are the future for North Carolina. And Mark Meadows was bragging the other day about the Trump economy. The Trump economy is great on Madison Avenue. It's not in Madison County. You know, where unemployment's low in this district, but look at the poverty rate. 15 of the 17 counties are above average in poverty. The average is 11%, and many of these counties is 16 and 20%. So what does it tell you? People are working, they're not earning a living. So I think green is the way to go, and we need those red votes, and we can get them.
Do you mind repeating the question? Gets watered down a bit.
What specific strategies will you propose and support to move our economy towards clean and renewable energy sources?
Thank you, Chris. I think that better tax incentives for renewable energy is a good idea, because we got to get off fossil fuel. That's the bottom line. That's where the greenhouse gas comes from. And as Mo mentioned, our military, we spend almost half of our military budget, which is $750 billion a year. Almost half of that is spent protecting companies like ExxonMobil. Our tax dollars are protecting a private company's interests in the Middle East and the sea, the path back, bringing the shipping lanes to bring the oil back here. So if we went to completely renewable energy and got off of oil, we could bring that money home and invest it in renewable energy technologies, better wind, better solar. We could build solar panels here, not in China. We can stop making plastic out of oil and natural gas and make it out of hemp. And in all 17 counties in this district, we could create thousands of jobs and put farmers back to work that have tobacco allotments, and they could be growing hemp. And we could be putting textile mills and furniture plants back online, manufacturing textiles and plastics out of hemp that's biodegradable. The plastic that we make now is floating around in the ocean, and it will for another 100 or 500 years. We've got to stop that. We've got to think smarter about our energy usage. So we've got to give incentives. We've got to reduce our oil usage down to zero and stop producing greenhouse gases. Thank you.
Green New Deal, period. You might not realize this, but it's not just a snappy marketing phrase. It's actually a resolution that's in committee in the U.S. House of Representatives. It also includes a lot of aspects that are geared towards economic justice. The net zero carbon emissions by the year 2050, by the latest. I actually modeled a lot of my platform around the Green New Deal and making sure that I was hitting every point within that. I'm not okay with anything less than that. The resolution that was sponsored in the House was actually written by somebody 3 years younger than me. I'll just go ahead and point that out. During my lifetime, I've seen a lot of politicians use a lot of rhetoric about how we have to do something soon. We haven't fixed it yet. We are living in the only window of time in which we have to stop this, to treat it like an emergency, and to actually stay under the warming thresholds. I'm not okay with going through it personally or leaving it to future generations, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Since I've been a kid, we've seen it go from a popular 90s thing, my generation grew up watching Captain Planet. We now have a Congress that doesn't seem to understand science that we learned from a cartoon in elementary school in the 90s. We're going backwards, and we have to push forward. There's a saying, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. I'm tired of being on the menu while my future is being decided. Congress is made up of 6% millennials. That's age 24 to 39. 8.6% of Congress is silent generation, which is over the age of 75. Representation matters, and climate change is one of the main reasons that I'm running for this office.
The organizers submitted a host of excellent questions about healthcare, but there was one very specific one submitted by a local healthcare professional I'm going to read. And I'll warn you on the front end, this one's a little long, but it's a good question. So, accessing medical information in a timely and accurate manner is essential in order to provide appropriate care and minimize costs. Other industrialized countries like France and Taiwan have centralized sources for medical information. Assuming that single-payer healthcare system is years away in the U.S., what can be done in the interim to improve access to patient medical information? So what can be done in the interim to improve access to patient medical information?
I wouldn't necessarily assume that single-payer healthcare is years down the road. I think that's something we can do now, and I'm sure we'll probably get into that a little bit later. In the meantime, we can write laws, first of all, to require medical professionals to share data with each other. That's a problem in Western North Carolina because you may not have an internet. You may not be able to go to the internet and pull up somebody's records, which is another reason we need to talk about the infrastructure issue. I 3 places on the way over here from Transylvania County, I lose my cell phone signal. So it's not just medical information, it's the information channel in general that we need to take care of. We have people who can't do their college homework online because they don't have internet service. We talked to somebody today who their power went out and they had to go to the top of the mountain with their cell phone to get a signal. Infrastructure in general will cure a lot of that problem, but we're going to have to force hospitals and doctors' offices and medical device companies and all those folks to actually change, make that information available on a real-time basis because in the medical profession, as many of you know, time is life. And sometimes a few seconds can make the difference between life and death. We don't have the infrastructure here to really get that information where it needs to be in a timely manner. So I would start with the infrastructure issue, which we need to do anyway, and then look at the laws that will require sharing of that information among the medical community.
Yeah, hopefully we're going to come back to healthcare. Just in case we don't, I think we're all in agreement that single payer is the way to go. I think the win in the red district, so if you go out there and say we're going to force it on a government plan, we're not going to get their votes. I think we can get there though. We make healthcare available, government-funded healthcare available to everyone. You can use it if you want to. I know some of the unions don't want to do it because they negotiated for good healthcare, and a lot of the folks on the other side don't want to be forced on a government plan. But if it's available to everyone, and if you don't want it, you can buy your own or a supplement. I think the private market will collapse under its own weight within 10 years because of the administrative costs. And we'll end up on single payer, but we can still get those red votes by not cramming it down their throats. Part of that, the problem though that's specifically addressed is broadband access. Nationwide, over 90% of the country has access to high-speed broadband. There are many counties, a majority of the counties in this district of the 17, the rate is more like 58 to 65%. The kids can't compete in school with that kind of access, and it's bad for healthcare. I met a couple in Weaverville a couple of weeks ago, and they moved from one of the western counties because the wife had a medical condition that requires constant monitoring, and that requires reliable broadband access to do that. So they moved to be closer in to get broadband access specifically for her health. That also apply to health records and making them available. So from a federal level, there's bipartisan support for infrastructure spending. Everybody agrees our infrastructure is not up to date. I would target high poverty counties to build schools, repair schools, and to bring broadband to those areas that are underserved.
The question was about getting medical records.
Yes, sure. The last part, what can be done in the interim to improve access to patient medical information? So centralized sources for medical information, like other countries have.
Well, my doctor in Asheville, he's totally on board with Medicare for All because of the administrative nightmare that will be eliminated. I think the internet is a big part of information. We've got to work on the infrastructure, our communications infrastructure, cell phone and broadband internet, so that information can be shared, and that's not an obstacle to information being shared. But I kind of reject part of the question about the fact that Medicare for All may be way down the road. I'm not going to be satisfied with that. We got to fight for it. And we've got to elect Democrats in office so that we can get to that as soon as possible, because Medicare for All is the only solution to our health care debacle. And when we get to Medicare for All, the administrative cost in our health care will be reduced by up to 30%. Of the overall cost of health care could be reduced up to 30%, because that's how much of the administrative work costs our health care. So I think just fighting for Medicare for All and making sure that we have our communications infrastructure in place so that we can share information.
Rural access to broadband is an issue, and my platform addresses that. That's not what's going on here, though. The issue is that we're not putting our dollars where our beliefs are. We need to fund it, simple as that. We need federal legislation and federal dollars in order to establish a national network. I don't think there's really any other solution than that, and we need to pony up and prioritize, because that's important. That's more important than endless wars or subsidies for corporations. Thank you.
Medical records and access. HIPAA. The HIPAA rules right now are just too tight, and they do need to be relaxed. I'm an attorney, I'm licensed in North and South Carolina, and I understand the need for privacy, but I also understand the need for our medical professionals to be able to help us. My husband is a physician at the VA, a family doctor. The VA is very important to me and to my family, and we don't want to privatize the VA. We need to protect the VA and the people who have served our country. That's important. The communication amongst the different entities, that when you have different subspecialties and they want to help each other, we do need to have a more seamless communications path, and we can work on that. As I've said, I am for Medicare for all who want it. I do understand that in order to get the unaffiliated votes and any of those disaffected Republicans who may see the light, we need to make sure that they can keep their private insurance if they want to. That is important to bring them with us. I have a philosophy, and I believe that there is a fear of loss. And that is one of the things that holds conservatives back from coming to rational discussions. And part of that, and I speak with authority on that because I used to be a Republican and now I'm a Democrat, just like Hillary and just like Elizabeth Warren. We have to help elevate people and not have them suffer because they don't have insurance. I had a child who had one medicine, $4,000 a month. She's 23. She can't afford that when she gets kicked off our family insurance, and I certainly can't afford that for her. So I am gonna fight fiercely to be an advocate for us to have universal health care and to get there, to allow people to function and not and not be afraid of fear-mongering. Thank you.
A little process break for a second. So we've got a series of questions on various subjects. At the end, I want to make sure we have enough time for some questions for the audience too. So when I gave you that look, it was not that I did not want to answer. It's I don't know what they're going to ask. So we might return to healthcare, we might not. So all right, one thing I do know that we're going to ask. There's a series of questions about poverty. Of course, one of the issues that was most frequently mentioned in the questions submitted. One I particularly liked. Because I acknowledge the complexity of the problem, not just poverty by itself. So the question was, what policies would you propose to address poverty and the interlocking problems of homelessness, affordable housing, and access to mental health care? What policies would you propose to address poverty and the interlocking problems of homelessness, affordable housing, and access to mental health care?
Yeah, that really is a complex question. I've got 2 Masters of Law in Government Procurement and Fiscal Policy, and I taught fiscal law at the Air Force JAG School. My division, when I was at Congressional Research Service, we provided advice to the Armed Services Committee on the House and the Senate on defense budget. I think our fiscal policy is upside down. You know, it's top-driven, from the top down. In the military, the $750 billion defense budget is more than the next 10 countries behind us combined. And are we safer than they are? It's wasteful spending. You know, in the military, we're told to buy things, billions of dollars of stuff that the military says they don't need, they don't want, and it doesn't protect our national security, but somebody in Congress wants it, and they tell us to buy it. If you've ever worked in government, you know at the end of the fiscal year in September, you're encouraged to go out and spend every penny you've got, because if you don't spend it before October 1st, you obviously don't need that much next year. So we've got this top-down system, and ought to be a bottom-up. That applies in healthcare as well, where everything is driven from the top down based on profit. If it's bottom-up, you know, folks have heard about trickle-down. They've gotten trickled on, and surely they realize that by now. We need an economy that lifts up from the bottom. Let the bottom lift the yachts at the top, rather than create them at the top. So I would reorient our fiscal policy to define the requirements and then build up from there and fund what we need. I think we could cut the defense budget, at least take $250 billion off of that and still have the strongest military in the world. And we could use those resources for other things like healthcare and broadband and things that we've discussed. We got to repeal the tax cuts. You know, we've got $1 trillion deficit. Since Trump took office, remember Mark Meadows was always griping at Obama about debt and deficit. We've added $3.25 trillion to the debt since Trump took office. I think we can balance the budget. If you repeal the tax cuts, the deficit right now is about $1 trillion a year. If you put those the money back, that's about $1 trillion. We've got a balanced budget. If you implement a sensible fiscal policy, we can save that money, use it elsewhere, and I think sound fiscal policy will get some red votes.
So poverty is what the question was about, fighting poverty. My platform has 4 legs to it, and it's about bringing better jobs with better wages to Western North Carolina, to bring people out of poverty, to build the middle class and make the middle class stronger. The 4 things that we can invest our federal tax dollars in that are going to directly help people in poverty and bring people out of poverty is universal health care, public education from pre-K all the way through career readiness, community schools, tech schools, so that folks don't have the burden of student loan debt when they get out and they can start working and paying taxes. Investing in our environment with jobs right here in Western North Carolina, whether it's growing hemp or whether it's manufacturing or whether it's retail or wholesale jobs. And the infrastructure jobs, rebuilding our schools and rebuilding these roads and bridges that are crumbling, our national forest. Tourism is our #1 industry in Western North Carolina. We have national forest here, and the signs and the pathways, and it's crumbling. We need to spend money to invest in that to bring this tourist here. Short little story. Woman gets pregnant shortly after high school. She couldn't afford to go to college. She's a single parent. She's working a minimum wage job. Can't afford child care. Barely can afford it. Her paycheck pays for that pretty much, and that's all she has. So she works week to week. She's going to work, but she doesn't have enough gas to get to work. So she pulls in the gas station, and she gets $10 worth of gas, and then she leaves without paying. She didn't have the money. They catch up with her, they arrest her. Because she can't afford the $10 in gas, she can't afford the cash bail. So they lock her up until her court date sometime in the future. She loses her job, she lost her children, and she lost her home because she couldn't afford the $10 in gas. That is poverty, my friends, and we are letting the American people down.
So my platform includes Medicare for all, period, full stop. That's how we help mental health access. My platform includes increasing federal dollars for affordable housing. That's a huge issue. I used to live in Nashville. A lot of people say that these days. When I'm asked what's my two most important things, it's economic inequality, which includes healthcare, since wealth determines access, and climate change. Those are very interrelated. My platform calls for a $15 living wage tied to inflation. It calls for free public colleges and trade schools, eliminating student loan debt. I'm the only one talking about universal basic income. That's a great way right now to really alleviate poverty. A proposal like that would cost $539 billion per year. Right now, the ramifications of childhood poverty cost over $1 trillion annually. Medicare for all would save over $600 billion in administrative costs. My father was a minister, and I was lucky enough to grow middle class, but I was not insulated from rural poverty. I don't think a month went by where my dad didn't have to pop up out of bed at 11 p.m. and run over to the church to write a single mom a check, because otherwise her lights were getting turned off. We had a family of 4 living in my living room for 9 months my senior year of high school. Unemployment is low, but the poverty rate is high. There are 40 million Americans living in poverty right now. That's unacceptable to me. And that's why I'm running. And you'll find that my platform comprehensively addresses that. Thank you.
We have to lift people up out of poverty. And the way we are going to do that is with jobs. It's with restoring the middle class, which has been being decimated. The tax cuts have to be repealed. We can't have corporate welfare. We can't have the 1% getting tax breaks off the back of the working people. We have to help people so that they don't say jobs, 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 and that means you have to have 3 jobs to live. Affordable housing is important. And one of the things that I found, I told you I'm an attorney in North and South Carolina, but I'm also a real estate agent licensed in North and South Carolina. And I have helped try to get affordable housing. And I've run into racism and discrimination because in affluent areas, they don't want it in their neighborhoods. And I have fought tirelessly to say that's not okay. One project we had, the $35,000 was the mean income for affordable housing. So that was every police officer and every teacher in that community. That's who people are discriminating against. We need affordable housing. We also need, with healthcare, we need to stop the recidivism that is in our jails. We need to help get people off the opioid epidemic. We need to help them with one, transportation, so that they can get to and from work. They can get to the doctor to get methadone if they need to. They need to get their children to school. We need to lift people up out of these situations because that is how it comes back to them. There's a lot we can do to lift up poverty by strengthening our workers' rights, collective bargaining, and to help our middle class. By making a stronger middle class, we have a stronger America. Thank you.
One of my Facebook followers posted the other day that Trump announced that there were like 160,000 new jobs created in this country last month. And my friend said, yeah, I have 3 of them. And I still don't have health care. And it is an interlocking problem. So people don't have jobs. They don't have money. They're in poverty. Because they're in poverty, they can't get health care because they have no hope. They have mental health issues. We've got to recognize that mental health is health care. It's not just pneumonia and heart disease. It's mental health is health. But we have such a stigma associated with mental health that we tend to try to ignore those people because we don't want to see that. We don't want to know that that exists out there. So what do? Mo talked about the budget. I was a budget officer in the Air Force. I'm very familiar with the budget process. And it's absolutely right. We used to pile up a kind of a wish list for the end of the year. So if there's any money left over, you had to spend it or your budget was going to be cut next year. You wouldn't believe some of the things we spent money on, just so we would make sure we got that money in the budget next year. So I would work to require every agency in the federal government to go to zero-based budgeting, which means I don't care what you spent this year. You tell us what you are going to do next year, what your mission is, what it's going to take to accomplish that, and we'll fund you based on that. And if it's less than this year, that's the way it is. If it's more, then we'll talk about it. But that's a fake system when we base what we get next year on what we spent last year. But we can take a big chunk of that defense budget, put it toward things like affordable housing, put it toward things like job creation and affordable housing. And the number one issue to attack most of that is really going to universal health care because that will save people money and it will keep them well and keep them off the streets. I'm ready.
Thanks, Chuck. Phil Price on this one. We had a whole lot of questions about immigration. This one was submitted by employees of the Vecino Farm Worker Health Program. Do you plan to advocate for a specific plan regarding immigration reform? If so, please outline that plan. Do you plan to advocate for a specific plan regarding immigration reform? If so, please outline that plan. I would add it in 2 minutes.
Well, we're still working on a lot of specific plans, but we've got to get more judges at the borders that can process these asylum cases so that people aren't denied and sent back to Mexico or Honduras, or wherever they came from, to be harmed by the threats that they ran from in the first place. We have to penalize the employers that are employing undocumented workers, because that's where the problem comes. The American workers don't have a level playing field as long as there are employers like the guy in the White House and many other people who employ undocumented immigrants, and they treat them like slaves in many cases. So as long as they're allowed to employ the undocumented immigrants at a lower, they're not being protected by workers' rights like American workers are. So it upsets the balance. So we've got to, that's one of the things that we really have to address, because as long as we have employers in this country that are happily employing undocumented workers, and they know that, then they'll continue to seek that employment. So we got to address that. I think that's one of the biggest things. But as people are seeking asylum, as they come into this country, we've got to be able to have the manpower at the border to process the people who are seeking asylum. And we just don't. We're failing on that right now. So I think that would be one specific thing that I would address.
How many of y'all have heard of a book called the Bible? A few of them? Oh, I'll give you a few more hands. Okay, great. So you've heard of Jesus. Regardless of your affiliation, creed, and whatnot, he had some cool ideas. Can anyone here list any verses from him about national borders and border walls? Cool. You'll find that's true in most religions. I studied philosophy. You'll find that most ethical systems don't talk a lot about excluding others based on arbitrary things like where you happen to be born. I think we need to remember that these are not migrant workers, they're asylum seekers largely. And we have to remember that we as people have a moral obligation to take care of people, regardless of national origin. We need to ensure that DACA recipients are allowed to stay here. It's crazy to be sending someone back who does not remember their home country. We need a clear path to citizenship. When I was in my early 20s, I dated a girl from Sweden. I can tell you that it is a Byzantine, difficult process under the best circumstances. There is no easy path to citizenship right now, and we have to change that. I'm the only candidate who has called for abolishing ICE. It's a 2003 program post-Bush. We have legal means to deal with lawlessness already, and the only thing that organization does is creates terror within the immigrant population so that they do not report crimes, so that they're more able to be exploited by employers, so that they're suspect to domestic abuse and they won't go to the cops. That's where I stand.
I was trying to think how long I've been a lawyer. It's been a long time. And it's been more than 25 years. Let's leave it at that. So one of my very first cases was a lady who had been brought here to be a house servant from Monaco, from Morocco. And the first thing that her employers did was take her passport, and they kept it from her. And they said, you're gonna work anytime, anywhere, and do anything we want, or we're gonna deport you. It is that kind of fear that people live with immigration. And when the fear mongers on Fox News start sending this message, because not only are we challenging integrity and morals and ethics, we're challenging an entertainment system that has a megaphone that is entertainment and not telling the truth to issues. And it's creating fear that we don't need. And what we should be doing is having integrity and morals and welcoming people to this country and welcoming people who want to follow the rules. But the rules are too complicated right now. We need better communication. We need better computer systems. One of my best friends has immigrated and is now a US citizen. Took her and her husband 18 years to get here. My grandfather came from Italy when he was 18 and went through Ellis Island. We welcome immigrants to the United States. We also welcome asylum seekers. 138 people who tried to seek asylum to the United States from El Salvador have been killed because they were sent back. We have asylum seekers who have come through one gate on our southern border to be told, no, that's not an asylum seeker gate anymore. You have to go to this one over there. Go back to Mexico City and come back up. Those women and children have been raped, murdered. That's not okay. We're better than that. We are better than that as America, and we're better because, just think of the Statue of Liberty. We need to be a beacon.
We always seem to forget that this country was founded by dreamers, wasn't it? For dreamers, by dreamers, for dreamers. Now that we got ours, hell with everybody else, right? This is not about national security. This issue is about the color of your skin. The Trump administration doesn't want people that don't look like us and don't talk like us. And that's not acceptable. And the way they enforce it is not acceptable. We need to keep our promise to the DACA recipients. We need to give people a path to citizenship. We need to simplify the rules to come here legally and give people the opportunity that we have. I had a former student at Brevard College who was of Mexican descent. His father came here legally, had been here, and one of the rules was you have to be here for at least 180 days before you can leave the country. So he'd been here for only a couple of months. His father died back in Mexico. So he went back to Mexico to attend his father's funeral. They went to Charlotte. They were waiting for him at the airport. He never showed up. So they're calling around trying to find out what's going on. They called They called the Atlanta airport and they said, no, he was on the plane when it got to Atlanta. It took them about 4 hours to going through law enforcement, emergency services, and airlines and everything else to finally find out that they had tracked him, and because he had left before the 180 days and came back into the country, when he got off the plane in Atlanta, they took him to jail. Didn't call anybody, didn't bother to let anybody know, and said, you broke the rule, now you're out of here for good. That's wrong. That's not the America I grew up in, and that's not the America that I want to represent.
I don't know if you saw this morning, President Trump was at a prayer breakfast. It seems kind of ironic. I don't know how those people look at him and support him. You know, all he talked about at the prayer breakfast was himself. You know, I think we need to be, you know, as Michael said, more like the Christian, you know, the philosophies of all religions that are welcoming of people. You help the sick, you don't turn them away, you don't put kids in cages. I agree. I think we need border security, but we don't need the border walls. Glad to see the Trump vanity wall blew over this week. We're wasting our money down there. It's all show. It doesn't accomplish anything. But we need to, I agree with, I think we're all in pretty much agreement that what we're doing right now is just un-American. Particularly in DACA. You know, the kids who grew up here and all they've really known is America, to send them back to a country where they don't know the language and the culture and they don't have family is just wrong. What really appalls me is seeing veterans that went to Iraq and Afghanistan and fought and bled and then get deported. You know, Trump wouldn't serve, they did. It's wrong to do what we're doing. I agree that we need more judges. I was a judge at the Department of Labor, but I had colleagues that are immigration judges, and they're overloaded. We need more of them. People are coming to the border, you know, because they're fleeing persecution and poverty. They're entitled to a prompt, fair hearing on their asylum applications, rather than being turned away and told to come back, you know, 6 months or a year later. And I agree that we need to punish the employers. You know, we're punishing the powerless. So what we need to be doing, you bet, you know, Trump has hired dozens of undocumented workers and exploited them because you don't have to pay them a fair wage and provide health care because they're powerless. You put him in jail for a while, and this problem would end itself when employers are hiring and employing workers. So I think we're all in agreement. We've got to do better on immigration.
Mr. O'Shea here. One of the many things that makes the 11th Congressional District special is the presence of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians. What specific strategies do you have to work with the Eastern Band to improve the lives of all who live in the district? What specific strategies do you have to work with the Eastern Band to improve the lives of all who live in the district?
Cool. That's the first time we've been asked in all of these forums, I think, about specific Native American issues. Number one, we can seat the representative in the House. That would be a good start. I don't know if you all knew this, but they're finally using their authority to send a representative. A non-voting one, but that's a start. I'm the only one talking about universal basic income up here, and the Eastern Band is actually kind of a fascinating pilot program almost for that. They have their own form of that. So increasing programs like that, which are going to help all rural communities, and particularly ones like that. We absolutely have to address the history that racism has left economically. And I do believe policies like universal basic income are a way to right that. You have people like, you know, Native populations who are disproportionately poor. I think economic justice is a form of racial justice insofar as that, and a lot of my platform deals with that.
The Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians are a very important constituent of North Carolina District 11. And I respect their nation, I respect their tribe and what they're trying to do. They have interests where they want to have trust lands, just like other Indian tribes are allowed to do. They pay a lot of taxes to North Carolina. They employ a lot of people, a whole lot of people. They are a very proud people, and I am humbled by them. They are trying to protect the language, the Cherokee language, and teach the Cherokee language to their children and preserve their heritage and their culture. They need our help to have a voice, because I think that people have not given them the respect that they deserve. And I respect them greatly, and I think that they have a history of protecting our forests and our land, and they have been excellent custodians of the land and their Qualla boundary that they have. They own that land, and that is their land, and they protect that land. Do you know that they do all their own sewer and water and telephone, all their utilities? They do everything themselves, and they pay for it themselves. And they deserve our respect for that. And I want to help them do that. I think they're a very unique asset and heritage and culture, and they're a very big part of our community. Thank you.
EBCI, the one thing that we could do with regard to the EBCI in terms of helping the whole district is learn from them, because they're doing some really great things out there, and they have their own infrastructure, they have their own broadband, they have their own medical care. I'm putting many of their kids through college through the casino, but they've got a good system going on there, and they have an innate respect for the environment. I have so much appreciation for the native respect that we are all in this together. We're all part of one planet. We all should live together and work together and play together and respect each other and respect the land and respect the wildlife. We can learn a lot from that. The problem is we tend to isolate them because they have the reservation, they have their own culture, they have their own government, and I don't think we communicate with them enough. I've been out there several times talking to some of the residents of Cherokee. We had a forum there a couple years ago, and we can learn so much from them, but we've got to be engaged, and we've got to be a voice for them in DC, and they can help us learn how to do things better out here. We've got some things that we can offer them as well, but we are all one people, and we need, I think, number one, start with communication, learning about each other, respecting each other, and building each other up.
I think I pretty much agree with everyone else. I mean, they're a unique culture, and if you look around the room, everybody, for the most part, looks a lot like me. There are other people that live in this state that didn't grow up like I did and like many of you did, and we need to recognize the privilege that we've had and the hardship that they've had. So I've been out there a couple of times. We're going back again. I think just the fact we showed up, that we came across into the Qualla boundary, meant a lot. Because people told me that in 8 years they'd never seen Mark Meadows. Yeah, I know. It's that's one of the promises I've made, is that at least once a year in person I'll come to every county and sit down and have a town hall and hear what's on people's minds. And that includes, I need to talk to Principal Chief Sneed and make sure I get out there and at least once a year and talk to them about what their concerns are. I can tell you, having worked in federal government with the Trump administration, that the Bureau of Indian Affairs, that the morale there is like every other federal agency. Where it used to being a federal employee was an honorable profession. And the way that the administration has treated federal employees, it's across the board, folks are demoralized, and that applies to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I know a big issue for the Cherokees is the Lumbee Indians in the eastern part of the state are trying to get recognition as well, and using some loopholes to try to do it. So, my district includes the Cherokees, and I'm going to fight for them and make sure that they're treated fairly. But, again, we've had a privileged life growing up here. Many of us have that grew up in North Carolina. And we tend to, the African American community, the Native American community, that, we need to make sure that we're including them and taking care of them and lifting them up along with us.
So I've been fortunate enough to have a long meeting with Chief Sneed in this campaign. And, the Qualla boundary encompasses Jackson County, Haywood County, Swain County, Cherokee County, and Graham County, 5 counties in western North Carolina. What Chief Sneed has told me that they need is opportunities for better economic diversity, because they're basically living off of the casino. So my platform, which is about bringing better jobs with bigger paychecks and higher wages, will help the Cherokee Nation. One thing we've got to do is legalize cannabis, because right now, when people are arrested for a joint, a small amount of marijuana, if your skin is not so white, you're going to jail, most likely. And the cash bail system is probably going to keep you in jail. Wealthy white people pay their fine and go home. People of color get locked up and stay there, and their lives are destroyed because of it. They'll stay there until their court case, which might be a year down the road. They'll lose their job, lose their children, lose their home, just because of cannabis. We could be growing cannabis and regulating it and taxing it and providing jobs, making stuff out of the hemp part of it. We've got to stop locking people up and putting them away and throwing the key away. We've got to rethink things. And these things will help the Cherokee Nation greatly.
We had some questions. We won't ring true to anybody in the room. The questions about civility and bipartisanship. You haven't heard anything about that in America lately. So one of those was not a general one, but a really good one. Given that a legislator cannot pass policy with support from just one party, how will you work across the aisle to accomplish your goals? How will you work across the aisle to accomplish your goals?
I started a Facebook group, and we have about 4,000 people in it, and it is based on civil discourse. We have Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. And it is civil discourse. There are no memes, there's no hate speech, there's no bullying. Reaching across the aisle does take integrity and morals and moral courage, and it doesn't take temper tweeting. It doesn't take, we already see what that looks like. That's not a role model for our children. One of the things I want to tell you is that what's important to me is that no one is above the rule of law. And one of the things that I found out and why I'm in this race is because after the 2016 election, I found out that 7 of our 15 North Carolina college electors had lied under oath about where they lived. And I got copies of their voter registration cards where they voted in November, and then all of a sudden they were in different congressional districts on December 19th when all the electoral college votes were cast. So I got a legal team together of about 15 attorneys, 15 paralegals. I was one of 5 core attorneys, and we researched all 50 states. And we found 15 invalid electors. So that meant that Trump didn't get the popular vote. Trump didn't get the electoral college vote. I sent 1,200 pages of evidence to the Senate Judiciary Committee with my group, and there was silence. So I picked up the phone and I called every senator. Called all 100 of them, left messages, talked to their staff, and we gave it to every U.S. House representative. We made summaries, we made legal briefs. 7 Democratic House reps stood up for us. But not one senator would. There was a code of silence. And the congressional rules are simple. It takes 1 senator and it takes 1 House member to say, hey, let's look at this information. Is what this lady said true? But they wouldn't do it. And if they had followed the law, then it requires, under the congressional rules, 2 hours of debate per elector. So that's 100 hours in the House and 100 hours in the Senate that you and I should have watched as Americans on C-SPAN, on CNN, and it didn't happen. We have to follow the law. We just had an impeachment trial without witnesses and without testimony. That's not what we do to create integrity and trust in our system. We have to show the moral courage. We have to speak and do the right thing, whether it's popular or not, and we have to put our Constitution and our democracy first. Thank you.
I'd really like to tell you that I will be able to sit down and talk to the people on the right work things out and have a great conversation with them and be able to negotiate and come to some agreement. I don't see it happening. Until they get people on their side that believe in facts and believe in data and don't believe the windmills cause cancer, I can't work with them. And I don't think we're going to have to. I think we're going to keep the House. I think we're going to flip the Senate. I think we're going to have a Democrat in the White House, and we'll have the opportunity to push through what we want to push through without their help. And if that's what it takes, that's what we're going to have to do. They've done it to us for quite a while now. Now it's our turn to turn this ship back around and make America think again and start doing the right thing. I would love to work with those folks. I'm sure there are a few that we can, but at some point, if push comes to shove, if we've got the votes and we've got the power, we need to make things happen the way that we think they need to happen, because that's what they've done to us. They've stacked the courts. The Senate has 400 bills sitting there that the House, the Democratic House has passed that they won't vote on. We just had, she mentioned the impeachment trial was almost a party line vote. When senators stood up and said, I know he did it, I know he was guilty, but I'm not going to vote to convict. The system's out of control. We need people with integrity. We need people that can solve problems. And we need to get people in D.C. that can solve problems, get things done, and believe in facts and data. Most of them don't. So I don't know how well we're going to be able to work with them until they come around to logical thinking, but we'll do the best we can. In absence of that, sometimes we're going to have to cram it down their throat, I'm afraid. And you know, sometimes that's how politics works, and if we need to do that, I think we will. Thank you.
I hope you'll do your due diligence on all of us and take a look at our records. Like Ms. Gillespie described the important work she did to try to overturn the election. Go out and find that, take a look at it, and look at my record. I've got a record of, I resigned over the issue of torture during the Bush administration and fought them over torture. When I worked at Congressional Research Service, I ended up getting fired for writing 2 op-eds that were critical of the administration for not closing Guantanamo. The ACLU, I was not their favorite person when I was the chief prosecutor, but Anthony Romero, the head of it, called me the day I got fired and said, what can we do to help? And they spent $1 million and 7 years in federal court fighting for me. If you go on their website, you'll see under free speech, Davis versus Billings, and that was my case. We fought for 7 years, and eventually the administration came to us and said, what can we do to fix this? And they expunged my record, they wrote me a 6-figure check, and they gave me back my vacation time because I was already working at another federal agency. So I think what people want is somebody who's going to fight to do the right thing. I think that's why Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump were so popular, because people looked at them and said they're people that will break glass for them. They're not going to be beholden to the party. So I think when you look at a candidate, you ask yourself, I wonder if he or she's going to stand up and do the right thing and fight for us. With me, I've got a record of having done, I've been there, I've done that. So you can please go look at my record. Please Google me. Please look at it and decide for yourself. I've been there. When the briefings that you've seen, the impeachment hearings and the SCIF, I had the key to it. I did briefings there when I was working for Congress. So I think we can leverage that to take advantage to get good committee assignments. I think Nancy Pelosi is going to want to keep this district blue. So I think my experience, we do new member orientation. It takes about a year for a new member of Congress to figure out how to do their job. I was one of the ones that helped teach the course. So when I get there, I'll be up and running on day 1. So I agree. I'd like to work across the aisle, but hopefully we're going to win majorities in the Senate and the House. Because again, as Steve said, you saw yesterday, the only person that would stand up and do the right thing was Mitt Romney. And until people are willing, if you're in public service, you're not willing to lose your job, you shouldn't be there to begin with.
The question is how we're going to reach across the aisle. I've got friends that are Trump voters. I have customers that are Republicans and Trump voters, and we talk all the time. You have to validate people's opinion. You have to listen to people and stop talking at them. You gotta listen, validate. People want to believe that you care about what they have to say. That's the beginning of relationships. I will not cram anything down anybody's throat. We've got to talk to each other. We've got to find common ground. Now, my friends that are Trump voters, they They believe that I have some really sensible ideas. My customers that are Republicans that aren't necessarily Trump voters, they say, Philip, we need people like you in Congress. We need a lot more people like you in Congress. I'll vote for you. I did vote for you last time, and I'll vote for you again. The problem is Citizens United. Citizens United is what has divided us. And ever since that was passed, corporations and billionaires have been able to purchase the candidates that are going to go serve them. They hand them the legislation. They say, get this passed. They have no incentive to cross the aisle. They're paid to stand on the wall over there. And Democrats are guilty of it too. Stand on the walls. There's no common ground. There's no reason to find the common ground. Because you find the common ground, you're going to lose your job because your financer is going to leave you in the dust. So until we get the money out of politics, get rid of Citizens United, and actually have these sensible people vote for people that are going to represent them on the other side, that are like the people that I deal with on a daily basis, my customers and my friends, then we can reach the aisle. Because I'm reaching across the aisle. We're already having good conversations. And I can have that with the people that they will end up voting for and electing that are going to serve their interests. That's how we do it.
So here's some fun facts. In a recent survey, 71% of millennials said they would like to see a third party. I'm a lifelong Democrat from a family of lifelong Democrats. That's pretty terrifying to me, because I'd like there to be a future for the party. But I think it shows that people are tired of the partisan bickering. I don't talk about Republicans much on my social media channels. I don't talk about Democrats much either. I talk about solutions. They happen to be considered left. I don't see it that way. It either works or it doesn't. I'm a pragmatist. And I think what works for the working class in this district are progressive solutions. So when I'm in Congress, I will not be aligning by party. I will be aligning by, are you willing to work for the people of this country or not? Western North Carolina overwhelmingly went for Bernie in the last presidential election, and I think it's also for Trump. We're tired of political insiders. Here's another fun fact. In my entire lifetime, there have been 2 years we weren't involved in a major military conflict. If you were born after the year 2000, 0 years. There have been Democrats in office, and there have been Republicans in office. And we've heard a lot of rhetoric, but we haven't gotten much done. We're going to go to Congress, and we're going to work for the people and do our jobs. That's how we reach across the aisle.
Mention my name, so I just wanted to tidy up on that. You can see my electoral college information on my website on the community page, and there's a link at the bottom that says click here for more, and there was a Salon article written about our efforts, and all of our data is there, so you can actually see it. All of it's there. That's what we sent to the Senate Judiciary Committee and to Congress. And I want to let you know that I have been endorsed by a 2-star general, Major General Rick Devereaux. He's a retired Air Force, and he said, I'm the one. Thank you.
We'll do one more question that was submitted ahead of time, kind of run through like we've been doing, and then take questions from the audience. So be thinking about what you want to be asking about. We'll have the same rough time limits and rules at that point. The last question is about secondary education, really birth through secondary education. And the question reads, since a large part of a school district's funding comes from the area in which the school is located through property taxes, wealthy areas often have much more money to spend on education than poor ones. How do you propose to address inequality in our public education system at the federal level? How do you propose to address inequality in our public education system at the federal level?
first we have to pay teachers, regardless of where they are. We have to level the playing field between charter schools and public schools. I'm not necessarily against charter schools, but they have a lot of advantage when it comes to policies and funding and certifications and that sort of thing. We need to, I don't know, let's start with the Secretary of Education that can speak in complete sentences. Hire people, and I'm sure a Democratic president will hire people in his or her administration that are, in fact, Elizabeth Warren said she would hire a teacher for Secretary of Education, which I think is pretty cool. But we'll have adult leadership in the administration with the Democratic president. I told somebody the other night, you look at who Trump's hired. Somebody mentioned a lobbyist in charge of the EPA, Ben Carson. You can go down the line, Steve Mnuchin, and so on. I've seen smarter cabinets at Lowe's. And so we start at the top. We start with the Secretary of Education. We start with the Democratic president that values education. Change the rules. Get rid of some of this Common Core state-run curriculum. A lot of the Republicans the other night said that literally, I think two of them said, the states really shouldn't be making any laws, or the government should not be making any laws. They should leave everything up to the states. That's how we get where we are. So federal funding for not just teachers, but for facilities, books. I heard somebody the other day talk about their grandson was in the first grade. He bought him one of his textbooks and it had his grandfather's name in it. And we wonder why our status in the world is falling. It's because of education. You have people like Trump in the White House that can't put together a coherent paragraph. That shows you the importance of education and what happens when you don't have it. And we need to put the money, the resources, and the will into our public education system to make America think again.
When I grew up in North Carolina, we looked our nose down at South Carolina. Because if you remember back during Terry Sanford and Jim Hunt, and I worked for Rufus Edmiston before I went to law school, but you know, back then we were a proud progressive state. You know, we had good roads, we had good schools, we had Research Triangle Park before there ever was a Silicon Valley. And I left. I went to serve my country. I come back, the Republicans have taken over and they've tried to roll back time. So I agree. I mean, education is primarily a state and local issue. But there are things we can do from the federal level to help. You may have seen there's an article in the Asheville Citizen-Times probably about a month ago now that said our kids are in the bottom third of the country in math and reading. It wasn't that way when I was growing up. You got a good public education. I think what we can do from the federal level is increase support for Title I. You know, Title I provides funding to high poverty counties to help them pay teachers to teach the kids. Infrastructure, again, I think is an area where there's bipartisan support. I would direct that at high poverty counties to build schools, to repair schools, and to bring in broadband, to give those kids the opportunity. The article that I was reading was saying if you looked at Hillsborough County, in Chapel Hill and down in that area, they spend $10,000 per kid, per pupil. Out in the western counties like Swain, I think the number was $455. So even with the Title I support, which is about $500, that's less than $1,000 per pupil. And they can't compete with those kids down in Hillsborough County. I can tell you, having been in the military, the school system has become a way of segregation again. When we moved, my daughter went to, I think, 8 different schools. Some of those schools were great. She graduated from high school up in Northern Virginia. It was a great school. When we lived in Alabama and Mississippi, we paid for her to go to private schools because the public schools were so bad. Your education shouldn't be, the quality of your education shouldn't be based on your zip code. So we need to provide more funding, give everybody a level playing field to compete, and give them the good education that I got when I grew up in North Carolina.
My parents raised me not to look down my nose at anyone, first of all. I like what Michael says about how your zip code should not determine the quality of your education. And I agree with Michael in that we should have basically a minimum salary for teachers, so that those that live in Hayesville, that are teaching in Hayesville and Andrews and Murphy and Cullowhee and Silva, all over this rural district, are making the same amount that teachers are making in Charlotte and Raleigh and other big urban areas. My kids are all educated in the North Carolina public school system. My two oldest kids graduated from the school of North Carolina School of Science and Math with honors. My son graduated from NC State last spring, magna cum laude valedictorian in the chemical engineering department at NC State, and now he's got a great job making more than I make as a chemical engineer. So I believe in North Carolina's public school system. The Republicans, their MO is to take a little bit of money out of the program, take a little bit more out of it, and then watch how it starts to crumble, see what the effects of it are. And then once it starts to crumble, once it starts going downhill, then they really focus on it and they point the finger at it and see, look, it's not working. It's not working. We got to take all the funding out of it. That's not the way we're going to go. We've got to put more money in our public schools. And out here in this rural area, dealing directly with public education, back to my platform about getting broadband, high-speed internet to every household and business that has electricity is very important so that our kids can do their work. So we don't need to waste trees on textbooks because they're doing it online nowadays. So those are some ways that we can improve and sustain our public school system.
So my wife teaches first grade, so this issue is pretty close to home because she's one of North Carolina's many underpaid educators. She got her degree in elementary education from Western and did her student teaching in Jackson County at a school where 60% of her kids were on free or reduced lunch. Not hard to figure out that the property taxes there weren't really enough to make sure that those kids weren't having their education determined by the wealth of their zip code. My platform calls for what I call a minimum professional wage. Right now, in 30 states in this country, the average educator makes less than living wage. That's crazy. It's a 4-year degree. You have to take additional classes and pass tests. These are professional people. I call for making sure that from day one, educators are making at least a factor of the living wage in that county. I'm not calling for the same wage in Charlotte versus rural communities, but I am making sure that everyone is paid better than living wage from day one. And we need to do that by increasing federal money. As long as we leave this up to the states, it's going to continue to be the same problem where the wealth of your zip code determines your child's future. In my platform is also universal pre-K, childcare, and free public colleges and trade schools. Thank you.
We have to have an educated populace. We have to educate our children. We have to make it a priority, and we have to prioritize and respect our educators. Our teachers are so valuable to us. We don't need a brain drain of teachers moving to other states because they're not getting a living wage in North Carolina. We have to help our teachers. We have to support with federal legislation to show how important Head Start and SMART programs are for our younger children and give families support so that we can continue to educate our children. My 3 children have been in public and private school in North Carolina. My mother was a public school art teacher, and she also had a French major. I think she taught French for a while too. My aunt was an English teacher in high school in the public school system, and my mother-in-law was a history teacher in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, retired, and then she went back and got her master's in guidance counseling and helped at a middle school as a guidance counselor, which we definitely need more guidance counseling in schools. We have children who are suffering from depression, we have gun violence, we have other issues. We need the kids to have more guidance counselors. We need to watch what's happening with charter schools. There are some people who want charter schools. There's a different flavor for everyone. But our public school teachers are trained and educated, and that they are not held to the same standard. The charter school teachers are not held to the same standard as our public school teachers. They don't have to have the student teaching and training that our public school teachers have to have. And if a student comes to a charter school and they don't test well, a lot of those schools are wanting to do it to the test. And if they don't test well, those kids are edged out because they're going to lower that charter school's rating. And what happens? They go back to the public school, but the public school is not getting that per capita money. The charter school took it, they don't give it back, and our public schools are carrying the burden, and we have to help them. And I know my time's out, but we got to help student loans too.
So we'll keep moving in the same order. I think Mr. Davis is next on the first one. So any questions from the audience? Who wants to grab the mic from me?
Hi there, my name is Ben Ginney. I'm a ER physician here in Silva. And one of the things I deal with on a regular basis are opioid overdoses. Whether I'm signing death certificates because the EMS calls in, or I'm seeing someone who's just been revived from Narcan, and on a regular basis, people are just walking out the door. There's no treatment, there's no help. So what I wanted to hear from all of you, what are your plans specifically? What kind of bills would you sign on to or co-sponsor that is going to address the opioid epidemic here in NC11? And not just Medicare for all. I want to hear specifically what are your thoughts for solutions here.
Thank you for the question. That's an important one too. I think the opioid crisis is a lot of the issues we've talked about, like concentric circles, is you've got to address poverty and education and healthcare because they all feed off of each other. My landlord, we're renting right now, we're building a house, and my landlord is a physician that runs a treatment facility in Asheville. And he was saying that one of the unintended, good intent with unintended consequences are now when people are brought in to the emergency room when they've overdosed or they have a mental issue, they can't be transferred out. They have to stay there until a doctor will sign off saying they're stable. And once they're stable, they can't be involuntarily transferred to a treatment facility. So we've got some laws that were well intended that have unintended consequences. I think we ought to treat not just the opioid problem. I think we're all in agreement on legalizing marijuana, expunging records for that. We ought to be treating the drug issue as a health issue and not a criminal justice issue. We need to get, I think on the criminal justice side, we need to get, I think prisons ought to be an inherently governmental function, not privatized, where there's a profit motive in filling up the beds in the prisons. So again, I think we need to treat people for their drug addiction rather than criminalize it and put them in prison for profit for folks to benefit off of that. But I think it's a multifaceted problem that we've got to give folks a good education so they've got a good start, get them out of poverty, and give them something to look forward to so that they don't fall into this trap and keep repeating this cycle.
The poverty issue, dealing with poverty, I think will improve the opioid problem. I'd like to know if you have some specific ideas about legislation, not right this minute, because this is my job, but later. You can get my email address, I'd love to hear from you about that. People are depressed, and poverty tends to make people try to numb themselves. There's a Neville Brothers song about how we're just made null and void by heroin and hard drugs like that. We've got to address pain management, how we deal with pain management. I have friends that have serious pain and they deal with pain management. And they know that one of them lives in a state where medical marijuana is not available, but he uses medical marijuana and it works for him. And he can replace the opioids with cannabis. So specific policies would be to remove marijuana from the schedule of controlled substances in the federal level so the states can really deal with how they're going to regulate and tax that. It's a really big issue, and again, the Cherokee Indians, when I discussed with Chief Sneed, that was one of the things that he brought up that was a big problem. And we can't, it's not a criminal thing. We've got to treat people treat holistically when they're in their mind and mental health. And I've got a guy that helps me occasionally take down old barns and so forth. And his wife has she's dealing with substance abuse. And the facilities that are available right now, they're not helping. It's not adequate. They don't have enough money because we haven't expanded Medicaid in North Carolina. It is a complex problem, and I think that I'm going to listen to lots of people's ideas so we can come up with some real solutions. So I'd love to hear from you about that.
Yeah, I don't think you can live in Western North Carolina and not be 1 degree of separation from this problem. One of my best friends growing up graduated from Western with a 4.0 in the middle of the Great Recession, couldn't find a job that would provide anything other than minimum wage or health insurance. Eventually ended up in rehab 3 times last I heard. I think moving to Medicare for all, I know you said not to, but I think that's really important. I think poverty is a giant issue in these kinds of things. This is a holistic perspective, but in terms of more specifically, marijuana legalization, that's on my platform. I do believe it has excellent medicinal benefits. I know people have used that in lieu of opioids after surgeries and whatnot to great effect. My platform also calls for ending the failed war on drugs. We need to stop treating this like a incarceration issue and more like a public health issue so that these people can actually find treatment and we can fund the treatment correctly. I think we need to get the profit motive out of healthcare and the prison industrial complex. My platform also calls to get rid of for-profit prisons. I think as long as there's a financial incentive to put people into jail over drug offenses and to push pharmaceuticals within the private insurance company, we're going to have this issue. And until we cut those things off, we're going to continue seeing, especially rural areas, flooded with these kinds of issues. Thank you.
The opioid epidemic touches all socioeconomic statuses. It's not just poverty. I mentioned one of my best friends, I told you, that immigrated to the United States. Her next door neighbor, her son graduated from Chapel Hill a couple of years ago and came home in May. He had just finished his graduate program at Chapel Hill, so he did undergrad and grad, and he couldn't get his opioids. And he went downtown Charlotte and got some fentanyl. And then he was dead. And that's all it takes. It just takes a little bit of fentanyl. We have to clean this up, but we have to help these people. And one of the things that we need to do to help them is help them rehabilitate and help them come back into society. And when someone has been an opioid
the network of medical information might help us from keeping people who are doctor shopping and getting different prescriptions that nobody can keep track of to keep them from getting excess drugs. So if we could plug in the computer and see what this person's gotten elsewhere, maybe we won't prescribe that or the pharmacy won't sell it to them, and maybe that would help alleviate the problem too.
Next, and then maybe we'll go to the back with the hat on, and then I think that's probably about our time. Yes, thank you.
I had buildings to work in the congressional office for 6 years for Keith Sheehan. It's such a different job than you may even realize it is. He asked me to be a congressional rep for him and represent him in these counties out here. And we met in Asheville at our congressional office over there, and about 2 weeks after he was sworn in, I didn't know what the heck we were up to or what we were doing or what I was doing. And we showed up and I had a shirt and tie on and all of us looked very congressional. And about 8 of us, like 8 people that he had already hired in 2 weeks. And we sat there from 8 o'clock one morning. I thought we were going to be educated on what we were going to do. We really were educated. From 8 o'clock in the morning to about 6 that evening, we answered the telephone continually. And it was from constituents right here about TVA issues, about the U.S. Forest Service, and about Fontana, and about the job corps. We have 3 in this district. It was about everything in the world, Social Security and disability. And this was just one day. And when the day was over, we all thought, what the gosh have we got into it? And what I'm saying, this is about serving people, this job. And my question is, when are you going to show up, and how are you going to serve the people here at Hanging Dog in Murphy? And up on Rough Branch in Cherokee? Are you going to show up at any of these places? Do you even know where they're at? And it's important. It's important what you do up there, but it's important what you do here. And that people see you. I'm lecturing you, I guess. But I think that's very important.
You know what I'm going to say, boys? I'm going to be here. This is my home. You guys are my people. I'm running for Congress because I love you. I love Western North Carolina. And I will be back here every chance I get because I am not looking forward to swimming around in that sewer for any longer than I have to up there. I will be back here. And I know where those places are. I started this campaign 3 years ago, and I put, hundreds of thousands of miles on my vehicle driving around this district, just in the 3 years that I've been running for this office. Not to mention the 36 years that I've been here before that. And the 20 years that I traveled around these roads serving my customers in my antique lumber business. I have customers out there in Murphy, Hanging Dog. I've taken down barns in Hayesville and up in Mars Hill, in Mitchell County, Bakersville. And I've lived in 6 counties. I've lived in Jackson County, Macon County, Haywood County, Transylvania County, Buncombe County, and now I live in McDowell County. So this is my home. I have roots, deep roots here. I'm not going to serve anybody. I don't have big shots coming from Washington to help me win this race, because then I'd have to serve them. I have no intentions of serving them. I'm serving you. That's why I'm running for this office, to serve all of you, the Western North Carolinians that I love.
So my middle name is Greer. The Greers ended up in southern Appalachia around Boone, pre-Revolutionary War. I've got a lot of family history here. My parents built an entire community around a church in Mills River. My mom still lives in Mills River, and I would have a lot of explaining to do to her and my sister and all of my friends if I started abandoning this place. This is where I was born and raised. I went to school at Western Carolina. My wife grew up in East Asheville and went to school at Western Carolina. This is home. Period.
I like talking to people and talking with them, and I like listening to them, and I like sitting down and giving all of y'all the time of day. And I appreciate you being here tonight, giving me the time of day to get to know me. I'm from North Carolina. This isn't my first time voting in here in years. I grew up in North Carolina in Charlotte, married my high school sweetheart. We dated for 9 years. We were biology lab partners. Been married 29 years, almost getting ready to be 30 years. I have reared my children here in North Carolina. I'm here. We've had a home in Cleveland County, in Kings Mountain for 20 years, and we've had a family home in Asheville, in Fairview, for 16 years. My mother-in-law was born in Asheville, and her dad, so my husband's grandfather and his 2 uncles, they had Patton Avenue Candy Kitchen, Patton Avenue Cigar Store, which is where the Thirsty Monk is in Asheville. From 1937 to 1957, my husband's grandfather ran that bar. They ran the concession stand at Recreation Park. I've been out to Cashers for Thanksgiving, for weddings, been out to Transylvania County. One of my friends, and I just have fond memories because we wanted to wash our hair in the mountain streams. We brought our shampoo and we got our bathing suits on and we went into the creek. We thought we were just great. But one of the other things I've had, I will work hard and get my hands dirty and do the same thing as anybody else. And I want to help constituents. And if they have a problem with their passport, if they have a problem with the Forest Service, I'm going to be there and I will sit down with them and I am transparent. So when I go to Washington, you want to come with me, you just come on and we will walk the halls. I went with the National Association of Realtors last April and we walked the halls, hundreds of us. You know what that looks like? If we had constituents from North Carolina, 100 of us at a time, walking through, they'll say, what are they doing? And we will stand and we will be heard and we will go to each one. And I will come to every town, every county, anytime, all the time. That's going to be my job, driving around here and talking to people.
Well, I ain't from around here. I grew up on a small farm in southern Indiana. I went in the Air Force when I was 19. We got here as fast as we could. We've lived here a little over 7 years. My wife says we're going to leave here in a pine box, hopefully not too soon, but I am the oldest one up here. I have been showing up. I announced for this seat in March of 2019 because everybody told me the reason I didn't win in 2018 because I only ran for 3 months. I got into the race late, worked my butt off, got over 30% of the vote. Everybody told me you need to do it again, but you need to give yourself more time. So I left my job as a college professor at Brevard College. I announced in March. This is my 229th campaign event since March. I've been around for almost a year. I show up and I listen, and I'll continue to show up. And I'm going to work harder after March 4th to work against the Republicans. And I'm going to work harder than that in January when I'm sworn into Congress. And I'll be back here. I'll be back here in this room. And I'll spend probably more time here than I do in D.C. because I worked in D.C. It's not a fun place to be. It's hard to get around. The culture's bad. The traffic's bad. I'd rather be here anyway. So I will be back. And I've proven to you over the last 11 months that I will show up. I've got a record to prove it. Thank you.
For the 5 of us, 2 of the 5 weren't born here and moved here as adults, and the other 3 of us that were born here left for years and came back. We're all here because we want to be here in Western North Carolina. We're all running because we want to represent people in Western North Carolina. So we keep trying to out Western North Carolina one another, but it's about representing the people, and to do that, you got to win. I can tell you, one thing is just showing up. In many counties I've been to, folks that they've never seen Mark Meadows, so just showing up means a lot. So that's why I've committed to doing that. I'm going to at least once a year. There's a lot of work to do in Washington, and you can't run off and leave it because you're not going to get things done if you run off and come back home. But you got to come back home and you got to meet with the people. I met with I was at an African American church yesterday where the pastor brought in some of the congregation to hear me talk. I told him, when I take office on January 3rd, 2021, I'll face the voters again in November of 2023. That's 22 months later. When I go out here and ask, what has Mark Meadows done for you in the last 8 years? What can you point to that's made your life and your family's life better? And people hem and haw around, they can't point to anything. So I'm telling them, give me 22 months. And what I told them was, if I let you down, you got to hunt me down. Because you've got the opportunity in 22 months to fire me. But give me the opportunity, because what have they done for you? Nothing, other than put you in poverty. You don't have health care. Your kids are getting a bad education. They're trying to pollute the environment. Give me an opportunity. If I let you down, then vote me out. Because again, if you're in public service, you're not willing to lose your job, you shouldn't have a job to begin with. So we're all running to represent Western North Carolina because we love this place and we choose to be here. And I think we'd all be honored to represent all of you and all the 600,000 people that are in this district.
And
so much to everyone else who is my age and is here. Thank you so much. The gentleman in the front already asked about substance abuse in our community. I want to ask again. I think it's really important. And I want to know directly if you would support harm reduction policies and public funding for harm reduction, such as syringe exchange or public funding for Narcan. That's my question.
And the way we started, right?
Yes.
Narcan is really important, and our emergency people, whether they're firemen, paramedics, police, need to have Narcan. It is really helpful. And syringe exchanges have been shown to help reduce all kinds of transmitted diseases. So we do need to help that.
Yes.
So thanks everybody for coming. Thanks everybody for running for office.